being able to like, no matter I got to the point to where I could be asked a question in the middle of my interviews and like still be able to return back to base just because it was muscle memory and I had established that rhythm and being able to weave in and out of interview questions and my story and how it relates to whatever the position may be. And that was per position, by the way. So per job that I was applying for.
Yeah.
Sitting down, asking myself, and then also preparing myself to be able to speak to whoever.
That's a big point. Even like for public speaking, always practice saying whatever you have written down out loud, because you'll discover what doesn't sound natural when it comes out. Like when you actually hear it, it sounds a lot different than when you wrote it.
It's different. Yeah.
There's so many times. I'm like practicing in front of somebody, like, oh, let me just run through this real quick, and I'm like, that don't make no sense.
When you start talking, it's different. It's when it's stored in here, things sound perfect. Verbalize it and like have to like it also takes additional thought. Once you like are taking it from like a thought process or like just simply a thought to actually verbalizing it, it's different. It changes the context a little bit.
Context, the tone.
I'ma be who I gotta be. I ain't living in your fantasy, and I'll be real if it's the death of me. I'ma be who I gotta be, and I don't care who you pretend to be, cause I'll be real if it's the death of me. Yeah, lies are liars, they burning in fire.
That was so funny.
Alrighty, welcome to part 2, pretty much of a 1-part series almost. Last week we talked about the getting the interview part. This week we're going to be talking about how to get the job. And then after this episode, you're going to see on an HR expert that's going to actually give you practical steps, outside of the information that we know from experience. So appreciate you tuning in. We got a lot of fun stuff, but I'm going to let Kenny kick it off because Kenny is on fire and extremely passionate about how to get the job.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we can start open this up with sharing our experiences.
Yeah.
So episode 1 was pre-application process, pre-interview process. Now we go into, you've got the job. What are you doing to prepare yourself? You got the interview. Say you're going into the hiring manager interview and then like a team interview. Typically that you'll see those two things with like a skills test in there as well. But more so, how are you guys preparing for like a hiring manager interview? What are some key things that you think people need to hit on?
Yeah, I start with research. We kind of talked about that a little bit before, but once you get to this point and start talking to somebody, I feel like most of my wins have been because I know enough about the company, whether it's I did research online about the company or I reached out to 1 or 2 people like we kind of talked about before. It was like, hey, tell me about this job. What does your day-to-day look like? If it's a sales job, like what are you actually selling? Does everybody have the same position? Are we selling different things? Like there's a lot of questions, and some people are willing to help, some people aren't, but ask the hiring manager, ask employees. You're probably getting introduced to multiple people throughout this process that you can ask questions. So come with plenty of questions. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah. And that's a super important fact. And you don't even always come with a list of questions to ask, but also ask questions during the interview. We've hit on this in a previous episode, but the interview process is both ways. It's your time to learn about the company and the team, and it's their time to learn about you.
Yeah. And
so in my best interviews have been more conversational, where it's not just you sit there and get grilled by interview, like by question after question after question. It should be a two-way street. They ask you a question, you can ask one back. You can even ask all the same questions back to them to see how they would react to things or how their team does it. But a really important thing even before that is you need to represent yourself well. Make a good impression. Smile. Make eye contact.
Yep.
It's like the simple things are so difficult. If you're
the way
there,
you dress.
The way you dress. And it's different. It's a little bit different now because everything's so remote. A lot of interviews are through Zoom, but you can still dress nice. Don't be coming in wearing a tank top, wearing a backwards hat, ripping a vape on the interview. I've actually had someone do that.
Wow.
Had someone do that.
Wow.
I hope they watch it. Hey, just send this straight to him. Be like, hey, look, man, you're struggling a little bit. Here goes some tips.
Yeah.
But even just make yourself look fine, like put together. And you don't have to be put together in your life, but just make yourself look like it.
Yeah.
And smile.
So I think another thing too is like do the best you can to assuming that this is a a remote interview, do the best that you can also to prepare your environment.
Yeah.
So whatever that looks like for you, you got kids, your baby girl, baby boy, first thing in the morning, they're crying, do the best you can to mitigate that. Area around you is pretty important. If I join and I may or may not be paying attention to what's behind you, so what you have on the screen, I'm just observing, that may or may not be a point or two plus or minus, from your overall assessment. So it's pretty important that you try and do the best you can to prepare there. I have seen life happen during an interview, little kids crying in the background, but absolutely still recovered well and knocked it out of the park. So if life happens, life is going to happen, but just do the best that you can. If you can, mitigate it.
Yeah. And that's also
in another room, something like that.
It's also a good sign. Like if your interviewer, has an issue with anything that comes up like that, like life happening, it's a red flag. It tells you right there, right off the back, it's a red flag.
Yeah.
If someone's understanding and like it doesn't bother them, like most people, most hiring managers, most team members during interviews, especially with the recent times that we're in, with everything mostly being remote, people will understand.
Mm-hmm.
And like you want to work in an environment where your coworkers can share empathy, like, and they understand things are going to happen. Not everything is going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So like do your best. Exactly. It's make sure you have working technology, make sure you can join the Zoom, make sure you have the right link, make sure you have the right time, make sure you can have your video on, etc. Make sure, do your best to your ability. But at the end of the day, don't overstress. Like if life happens, don't panic. You really like, that's the biggest thing. You need to stay composed. Like you only get one first impression. And for job interviews, you really have to make it count. It's a lot of pressure, but it's a lot simpler than you think.
Something I will say, because there's probably a lot of people transitioning out there right now. Like we're talking about remote work because that's kind of what I don't want to call it in a bubble because a lot of people are doing it, but there's a lot of people transitioning from, warehouse style of work to hybrid or hybrid to fully remote. So like if you are transitioning right now from a different industry or a different type of work style, like ask someone, because there's probably an etiquette that you don't know about. I remember when I was first coming out of high school, going into college, like I had to do interviews for schools, like with coaches, I had to do this type of thing. And same thing coming out of college. And I had to ask like the professionals, like, hey, what's the etiquette for this industry? What do they normally dress like? What are some of the words that they like to use? Like you may not be familiar with the culture of the company too. So like those are good things to try to pick up on when you're in conversation or ambiance or whatever it is for these interviews.
Yep. And so like to dive into like the meat of interviews, the best thing that I can tell people is like in the previous episode, I said, everything on your resume is fair game. Be prepared to be asked about everything. You need to have rehearsed answers for them. Like everything that's on your resumes or examples of the basic behavioral questions. Tell me about a time of a conflict and how have you resolved it? Or how do you give feedback to a team member? These basic questions that are behavioral questions to see how you react under common situations in the workplace. Have a rehearsed answer. And there's multiple formulas for it. Like one of them, present the problem and then like give the background context and then give your solution or give like the experience. It doesn't have to be a long rant. You need to make it rehearsed, practice. It can be like a 2-minute response of cause and effect, problem, solution. This is the issue. This is the situation at hand. This is what happened. This is how I dealt with it. This was the aftermath. Like you need to rehearse. You need to have rehearsed answers and be prepared. And that's kind of a theme, is just be prepared. Because you just need to give off that you're well collected, basically.
So it's interesting you say that. I think the methodology you're talking about is called the STAR method, or at least that's kind of
that's one of them.
Yeah.
I actually had an interviewer say, "Hey, look, you're about to go through our interview process. We suggest that you use the STAR method." And this is like a high level company too. And they're like, "Hey, like, we want you to, we're going to see how you do this." And this is the actual team, not a recruiter. I was like, dang, you're telling me how to interview for this job? Like, is this like a test to see if I'll like read the material and act on it? Or is this how I'm receiving feedback? Which there's probably going to be a test throughout the interview process of that. But I was very surprised that they were like, hey, this is how you interview. And I was like, wow. So before we jump into that, the STAR method, Kenny, you just listed it off, but STAR is situation. So set the scene and give necessary details of your example. T is task. Describe what your responsibility was in the situation. Action is A. Explain exactly what steps you took to address it. And then R is result. What outcomes your actions achieve. So STAR method. And I'm telling you, the company I was interviewed for, obviously I didn't get the interview, but was a massive company.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just some things to add to like what both of y'all are saying. So we talked about being able to be, I guess, short and punctual on like the questions in regards to your resume, using the STAR method or something similar to be able to, like, you don't want to spin the questions. And then the last thing that I would add is, like, some people lean too much on personality. So keep in mind that it takes a healthy balance of personality and then also actual, like, the technical aspect, I guess, in a way. Because the last thing that you want to do is make it to the end of the interview and we ran out of time and I have zero context on, like, actually
such a good point,
how much of the job you can do or something like that. Some people would view that as a good thing. Some view it as a bad. I guess it's not up to me to decide, but you definitely want to leave a balance of both. I wouldn't allow your personality or your character to completely just take over the interview to the point to where you also don't touch on, you know, sharing your story. You don't touch on your accomplishments or share how your experience is relevant to the position.
That's also on the interviewer, though. That's more on the interviewer than that's more on the interviewer than it is on the interviewee, because if they need, like, usually if they don't feel like they have an assessment of your skills, they might ask you for another interview that's purely based on technical. So, like, essentially in tech, most of the time you're going to have a technical analysis, whether it's a take home in any role. They could ask you to do analysis, like project management, right? Here's a project, come up with a plan for us, forecast us, CS. Here's a customer situation. Like, you're going to have some sort of technical interview, but you definitely need a balance of both. Yeah. So, and a good interviewers shouldn't let one dominate.
That's true.
The interviewer.
True. Yeah, you get one shot at interviews. Like you mentioned, that technical assessment. I absolutely hate doing them because it feels like I'm doing work for them that's probably going to benefit them whether I get the job or not. But just know that, like, you get one chance at every, you know, conversation in an interview. So, like, just blow it out the water, do it to the max of your ability, because probably what you're showing them isn't even what your potential is once you get the job, because hopefully they're going to be able to teach you something to take that skill to the next level, and that max that you show during an interview becomes like 50% for you.
Yeah. And it's okay to be nervous in interviews. Everyone gets nervous, and the interviewers understand. So they're not your enemy in the call. Like everyone understands that interviewing is tough. And the best interviews that I've had, even when I interview people, I try to set the tone. I try to make people feel comfortable. So yeah, I'll open up with conversation and just get to know the person. Give them some space to relax and open up a little bit. And then you can dive into things when things get more comfortable. But that's just my interview strategy. I've had rough interviews where, you know, like, the person interviewing me was tough, basically, and they gave me nothing to work with. And you're going to get good and bad, kind of like I said in the end of the last episode. You got to take a lesson from every single one,
learn from them all,
just move forward.
I agree. I've definitely been in a technical frying pan.
Some interviews
get absolutely roasted. I was like, it was from all directions. I was just like, whoa.
I mean, I've had, like I said in the last episode, I interviewed with my dream company and I bombed the technical, and I walked away feeling awful. And this was when I was younger in my career. I haven't tried again. And my current job, I didn't do great in my interview, and I didn't have a good showing in one of my technical interviews. I emailed the interview candidate again. I said, listen, like, I apologize. Like, if I could get a second chance, I would appreciate it. Like, I was extremely nervous. And I didn't, you know, I was like, I feel like I didn't portray myself to the best of my ability, and I got a second chance.
Yeah. Talk about those at-bats, Kenny. We talked about that a little bit last time, but talk about like why it's important to view them as, you know, practices.
Because you can, this applies to a lot more things than just interviews. Like, you can learn something from every situation in your life. And it's just it's a difference in mentality. If you can't focus too much on the result, because at the end of the day, some things are out of your control and they're out of your hands. What you can control is how you process the result and how you move on from it. What can you learn? How can you improve? What things could you do better? What things could you do well? It's not always, oh, I messed up everything. It's what you can ask for feedback as well after the interview process from your recruiter or from whoever your point of contact is. You can even ask it during the interview. It's a little awkward if you ask it at the end of the interview, but it can work sometimes. But it's just write down good things, like what went well. Oh, I really thought I explained this answer very well, or I like my answer for this question. Take that as a note, move on to the next one. You're better prepared. Every single thing is a lesson and you can learn from something. It's just, you have to be willing to do it. If you, and it's hard. I'm not trying to discredit the whole interview process, because the job search sucks. It's a grind. There's no other way to describe it. You're hustling. You're constantly hustling to try to get a job. There's hundreds of people who apply to every position, and you're trying to set yourself apart to be that person. It gets demoralizing too when you're getting rejected constantly, but you can't let that bleed into your interview process. And it's going to. This is a tough thing, but you have to keep learning. You have to keep moving forward.
So I have a couple thoughts that I'm trying not to actively lose right now. Well, but the practice, I want to speak on that first, because like my mentality around practicing for interviews is like, all right, like I said, either I'm practicing for the next stage of this interview, or I'm practicing the interview for a bigger job or a different job at another time. But either way it goes, you need to strengthen that muscle of interviewing, presenting, being asked questions on the spot, being able to hold your composure. Like you said, this can roll into a lot of different things in life. So yeah, but you use the interviews as something that's extremely important. Like, it is the game, but it's also like, all right, after I play the game, I need to take notes. I need to watch film on how I performed in the game for the next game.
Yeah.
You know?
And a lot of times your interview for like a higher position, it's still an interview. There's still similar elements to everything. You're just going to have to explain higher level things. It's at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You're interviewing for a job, regardless of the title. Like, the higher the title, the higher the job, probably the more in depth you're going to go. Right. So there's going to be more of an emphasis on the technical aspect, probably. Yeah. Because at that point, it's more about, can you do this job? You're going to have more responsibility. But at the end of the day, it all is your preparation. You need to be prepared to answer, and you need to come in with a good game plan and be able to showcase your skills. So, sure, like, you can punch above your weight class and get a job that you probably might not qualify for, but
go for it too.
Yeah, go for it.
That's another thing that almost slipped my mind is in terms of practicing for interviews. Worst case scenario, and this is also something that I've done. So let's assume you can't find any resources, or you don't have the time or funding available to get some feedback and practice actually, going through the motions of an interview. You take out that phone, you prop up that camera,
and
you film, and you run through your scripts.
Because
I don't think there's a better person that could tell you your flaws than yourself. You watch that video, you'll automatically dissect. Oh man, my tone is off. Oh, I was talking too loud. Oh, I was looking down. So that's something that I did myself. I did record myself practicing interviews, and I think that is what helped me establish a healthy cadence and being able to, like, no matter I got to the point to where I could be asked a question in the middle of my interviews and like still be able to return back to base, just because it was muscle memory, and I had established that rhythm and being able to weave in and out of interview questions and my story and how it relates to whatever the position may be. That was per position, by the way. So per job that I was applying for. Yeah. Sitting down, asking myself, and then also preparing myself to be able to speak to whoever.
That's a big point. Even like for public speaking, always practice saying whatever you have written down out loud, because you'll discover what doesn't sound natural when it comes out. Like, when you actually hear it, it sounds a lot different than when you wrote it.
It's different. Yeah.
There's so many times.
It sounds good in your head.
I'm like practicing in front of somebody, like, oh, let me just run through this real quick. And I'm like, that don't make no sense.
When you start talking, it's different. It's when it's stored in here, things sound perfect. You verbalize it and like have to, like, it also takes additional thought. once you like are taking it from like a thought process or like just simply a thought to actually verbalizing it, it's different. It changes the context a little bit.
Context, the tone, the meaning,
But go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, we've had a lot of touch, like, I think we hit a lot, and I was gonna kind of say, don't put too much pressure on yourself as well. Don't put too much emphasis on the interview itself, because like, you need to be confident. You need to find that balance between being confident and being relaxed, because you can't overstress yourself. Don't work yourself up.
Don't beat yourself up.
Prepare enough so that you can, relax a little. Kenny said earlier, you're going to be nervous. So just make sure you're prepared enough. Once you get there, it's like, hey, I prepared for everything I can. Nothing else I can do at this point. So let me just go ahead and give them everything that I prepared for. That's fine.
And it's tough, but like, everything comes down to mentality. Nervousness and excitement are the exact same feeling. Change the way you look at things.
Hey man, he's cooking. I will say, I think some of my best interviews, I probably had like wrenches turning in my gut. So just embrace the feeling that you have. Those butterflies, whatever you're feeling prior to that moment, embrace it. If you're scared, do it scared. If you feel good, do it feeling good. You tired, do it tired. Just do it. Don't overcomplicate it. Just get it done.
Yeah. Something that, Kenny, you kind of glazed over, and we all might have glazed over at this point, but take notes.
Take notes.
Take notes before, and during the interview, take notes. There may be something that, for example, like I take notes on the podcast because there be thoughts I have and I want to ask questions and I don't want to derail the current one, or I need to answer a question. So like during the interview, take notes on, hey, this person mentioned that they had a kid, or this person mentioned that they were at a position, they experienced the same thing as me. That's something that you can, and we'll go into this later, follow up with after the interview process, or you can use that as a point to relate to them in the moment. Oh, okay, this person has been in the military, they've played tennis. Probably I can now bring up a story about the time that I played tennis, and they'll understand more why I'm fit for this job. There's less questions around the ambiguity of what I did in my last role. I'm bringing it home now. Yeah,
dude, take notes, because also it gives you time to look over and process the interview, and then follow-up emails. Follow-up emails are a thing. Like, yes, they're kind of a formality to say thank you to your interviewers, but also if you have questions that you didn't get asked or that came up later, that's the best time to do it.
Yep. Yeah. Take notes, follow up. Golightly, you are currently interviewing right now, and I want to hear about your interview, like specifically being a military personnel, when it comes to boards. Like there's a lot of like weird nuances that you're kind of experiencing. So I want to hear about, like, all right, we're out of tech, we have a different job, or we don't have relatable skills, because I think a lot of people can resonate with that. So like, tell me some of the things that you can do in an interview to have relatable skills if you're from the military, or if you don't have a job that lines up exactly. Like, what have you seen?
Yeah. So great question. I think what I see the most, and what is viewed or kind of like highlighted in veterans is, it's potential based, because you are going to be learning new systems, or you are going to be learning new processes, whatever the case may be. But for veterans particularly, it's like they look at your ability to, you're a non-commissioned officer. Okay, so you're able to lead others. Responsible for X amount of equipment. Okay, so you're able to manage projects and equipment. So like things like that kind of stick out, and that like the different, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? The different specialties that we have, or MOSs, they equate to something. So you have to, if you haven't already, you have to dissect that and turn that into civilian terms. I can't come to you with these acronyms, and I can't come to you with all of these different things that I've done. I have to be able to, it's on us as veterans to translate that before going to an interview, right? Because we have to naturally assume that our interviewer is not a veteran or a service member. So I think in a lot of preparation that I've seen, which everybody that I've interviewed did a great job of translating everything, but it's important to be able to turn all of those bullet points and all of those achievements and everything that you've done into actual data points, like actual, like quantified data, and have it like broken down, because there is some people that think that because we're veterans, we're going to get a free pass, but take the guessing game out of it. Don't include acronyms. Don't include abbreviations or anything like any military terms or anything like that. You have to do the legwork and close that gap for employers.
Yep.
That's good.
That stretches even past the military, man. Never assume that your interviewers know what you're talking about.
Yeah. 100%.
Is there anything else y'all want to cover? We're like right up on time. Is there anything else y'all want to cover before we talked about follow-up very briefly?
It's hard to think about it. I feel like we talked about a lot, and so it's hard to. It's like slip in my mind if we missed anything. Like I'm trying to think of big things I think about during the interviews.
What about follow-up? I know that most of my follow-up at some point in time was like very archaic. You know, no offense to anybody, but sending a handwritten note is something that's really nice to do. But there's probably a little bit different things and way more technology that you can use or creative ideas outside of literally just a thank you note. So follow-up email is something that should be almost standard for you, no matter who you are. I know that I've done some, like send some gifts, like, you know, like donuts to the office with a note, or, you know, like a themed gift based on a conversation that I had with the hiring manager. Hey, we had this conversation, like, you know, about Fridays we do like health days. So send like a basket of fruit, you know, like there's certain things that you can do. Like, hey, I'm fit for the culture because of X. Like there's a lot of people that are out there that are doing way bigger than that, but
I just said follow-ups. I
think it's definitely useful follow-ups. Like there's there's variations to it that's effective. And I've seen it. Just think about if you were on the other end of it, how you would feel if you were like, you know, how does that look as a viewer to the email, you know? Those that highlight true appreciation of like the time that was taken to screen somebody, interview somebody, things like that. I think those are okay. But as far as like the ones I've seen and probably done in the past, but like those ones that's kind of like, really hoping that you guys call me back in for another, you know, I think those right there, because at the end of the day, it's still a business, right? And it's going to be a business decision regardless. So I think we should keep it professional and just, you know, if anything, just express some gratitude. That's my take.
Express
that's
gratitude.
The biggest thing. Just be appreciative of their time and be appreciative that you're in the process. Like I like sending. I send follow-up emails, but like follow-up gifts and stuff, no, that's not. That's not.
I think it depends. I'm not saying I'm doing this, you know.
No, some people do it. Some people do it. It depends on the person. It depends. Like, but like honestly, like no lie, like when I receive something like that in my head, this is just me. I'm not saying like this. Other people think the same, but I'm like, damn, this is corny. Like this is
it's only corny if it's actually like corny. If it's like something that's super standard, I'm not saying just send donuts to everybody. I'm saying like you send something that is like actually meaningful based on the conversation you had or the business case. You know, like, that's good, because then it shows that you've, even like in follow-up emails, if you hint on something that you talked about, it shows that you're paying attention. It shows that you remember. And it gets people to remember you. But for example, I was just going to say, like, for example, like with one of my interviews with Sixter, I created an email signature for like the different interviewers or whatever. Like, and I sent that to them, like post, and it was like their faces and their hobbies and like some kind of campaign. Like that was something super simple. And it was like, all right, this is a project I need to do to know that I understand the business. That's all it was. Is I was like, hey, I completely understand what this business is supposed to be. All it was. Didn't cost me any money.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I like that. Might have to add that to my toolbox, man. I got one thing that I do want to touch on as well, though. And you know, if you're watching or listening to this, I hope that it doesn't come to this, but you should also keep in mind how you're going to feel if you don't land the job. You know, let's say you don't get an interview. Let's say you don't even get an email or an outreach. You need to think about how you're going to feel, what you're going to do. Because a no can always just mean no right now.
Don't burn bridges.
They don't burn bridges. I think there's always a possibility, especially in this tech community. Like it's you never know who you're going to end up working with. So as far as like a no, don't go out on a whim and let your emotions get the best of you, because you need to be thinking about what you're going to do if another opportunity presents itself.
Oh,
just in the future.
Stuff that we didn't talk about.
Just a little nugget I just wanted to share, because I know the ratios are really crazy right now. So
it's good. Just never, don't take it personally. Like, if you don't get a job, like, that's not a personal attack against you. It's you gotta keep moving. But man, I don't know why I waited till the end of the podcast, but I just remembered some like big things that we totally forgot about.
Oh, wait.
Just throw them out there as bullet points. Just
all right.
Throw them out as bullet points.
One, don't lie. Like, tell the truth about like your skills and stuff. Like, you can talk about yourself in a positive light, but like I said, the resume, you can fluff a little bit about your skills, your experiences, but you need to be mostly truthful. The interviewer is when you're going to get exposed and you're going to get asked about that stuff. Be truthful about your skills, but that's also your time to tell you like your willingness to learn. That's why I said in the last episode, the interview is for where you can express where you want to go. It's to show your willingness to learn. It's to show like your knowledge of the industry or knowledge of their skill set and how you can grow. Like, that's where you can show your potential in the interview, because you can't get that from the resume. Resume is mostly to know, okay, is this person competent? And then that's where you can establish a base level of competency. And then the interview is when you can display that competency and then show your potential afterwards. Mm-hmm. 2, never, in examples, never, ever talk bad about someone else. Never, ever blame someone else. Because that's a cop-out. It's an instant red flag for me as an interview. If someone goes, like if you throw someone else under the bus, it's terrible. It looks terrible on you.
Person or company.
Yes, both. Never.
Yeah.
Like, and even when you're asked a negative about yourself, frame it in a positive way. What's your biggest weakness? Don't say you work too hard. Don't do that. Do something truthful. Like, if someone asks me, what's your biggest weakness? Say I could get tunnel vision and I could start lose track of time, and then it leads me to being disorganized, and I need to take a step back to reassess. Or I get context switching I struggle with, and so I need to. How I've been working on that is trying to allot my time better by doing blocks of focus. So like you can approach things better, but don't like spin things in a negative way and in positive. Never slight anyone. Like, don't be too negative in an interview. Don't be self-deprecating. Don't dump on other people. Like, everything that you say is a reflection on yourself, right? No one wants think about someone that you want to work with. You don't want to work with someone who always blames others. That's like a big thing about during the interview that I guess I completely forgot about while we were talking about it.
Hey, we got it though. We got it.
I'm about to say,
and make sure you wash your hands. Make sure you wash your hands
or take a shower.
That wasn't recorded though, right? So they don't know about that.
Or take a shower.
Yeah.
We talk about that on another podcast. Anything else? Any parting words?
I just got to I'm sticking with my guns, man.
Yeah.
If you're nervous, do it nervous. If you're scared, do it scared. Just get it done.
Just be positive. That's the biggest thing.
Be positive.
And also pursue excellence and cherish everyone. Peace, y'all. Yo, thank you for tuning into the P.E.A.C.E podcast. This podcast actually started off with 4 friends sitting around a table once a week. We were having conversations to educate ourselves about the world around us, talking about what we're dealing with day to day as regular people, and simply to self-reflect. So that's all that you're seeing us do here, and you're getting to see it live. So I challenge you to do the same thing. If you've made it this far, obviously something caught your attention. So get a group of friends and build a small community and start to join in the conversation. Like, these are tough conversations. These are fun conversations, but these are conversations that are needed to be had. In fact, I want to make it easy for you. If you're listening to this podcast at home, invite a friend over. Or maybe invite 2 friends over, 3 friends over, whatever it is. Turn your TV on, your computer, your phone, wherever you want to watch it, turn the podcast on, okay? And join in the conversation. if you're listening to this maybe on run, at the gym, I get it. I do the exact same thing. But maybe you can share the link, clip the file or something like that, and just pose one of the questions that you heard here today. The point is to build community and to self-reflect. Oftentimes we don't vocalize the things that we need to work on, and that's one small way that I think that we can, help improve ourselves, improve others, and most importantly, pursue excellence and cherish everyone. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you again next week. Peace.